Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the National FinTech Center's webinar series. It's truly an honor and a pleasure to welcome Dr. Hudson, who is a luminary in this field of blockchain, healthcare, the convergence aspects. The topic for today is the convergence of blockchain, IoT, artificial intelligence. What are the challenges? What are the issues? So it's really an honor to have Dr. Hudson, who is a pioneer in this particular field. I'll go over some of the housekeeping rules. One is that if you have any questions, please put your questions in the Q&A button on the bottom. Please mention your affiliation and whether you are a student or a faculty member. That's one thing. Now, after the presentation is over, Dr. Hudson will come back to an important slide. If you have any questions related to that particular slide, and we would want it to be interactive, please raise your hand, and then Ms. Tynesia will allow you to access your microphone. Once again, it's a pleasure and an honor from the National FinTech Center at Morgan State University. Dr. Hudson, it's yours now.
Thank you so much. And it is definitely a pleasure and honor for me. So we're very compatible, as we already identified in our prep meeting. So thank you so much for inviting me to join you all today. I'm super excited about this discussion to talk about the convergence of blockchain, also known as distributed digital ledger technology, or DLT, IoT, the Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence, and the challenges and opportunities it brings to all of us. There's been a lot going on in all these spaces, especially AI recently with ChatGPT. So a lot of people are becoming even more aware of these technologies. So you may be getting more questions about this as well. If you know even a little bit, people might look at you as an expert. So what we're hoping to do today is share some content about this, have an open discussion toward the end where we can get your insights, the ideas that you have on how these can be used for good, which is what we like to do, is talk about data science and advanced technologies for good. So you know a little bit about me. But I'll tell you a little bit more. So I'm founder and CEO of a consulting firm called FD Hint, Florence D. Hudson International. And I do consulting situations like this, presentations, other consulting on advanced technologies and diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm also on the editorial board, one of the founding members for Blockchain and Healthcare Today. So as Dr. Bapna was saying, I've been in this space for a while, kind of from some, not exactly from the beginning. We'll talk about that. But I enjoy helping others look at how to use this technology safely and to add value in many different ways, whether it's at a government level, industry, academia, real estate, agriculture, cows. We'll talk about all that. I also lead as executive director of the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub at Columbia University. That is a program funded by the National Science Foundation. And also we've had some National Institutes of Health funding. We work with Howard University on that. They gave us a sub-award last year for an NIH program called AIM Ahead, which is artificial intelligence and machine learning to advance health equity and researcher diversity. And Emily Rothenberg, who's on with us today, is going to be providing some fun things in the chat. She's been very involved in that. We took some of our content from the hub and our National Student Data Core and populated it into AIM Ahead. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. And then I also lead a working group with about 280 people in it from around the world that is sponsored by IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, and UL Underwriters Laboratories on clinical IoT data and device interoperability with TIPS, a very important acronym we're going to be talking more about. So that's a very high level view of me. A little bit about my background. I was actually a vice president and chief technology officer at IBM. I was very grateful for my very long career at IBM. I had various jobs in strategy and marketing and channels and all sorts of things. I worked a lot with research, being a rocket scientist by training. I was the senior VP and chief innovation officer at Internet 2 after I graduated from IBM, and was also a special advisor for the NSF Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. So I've been doing cybersecurity basically my whole life. My first summer program, an internship when I was in college through Grumman Aerospace Corporation, was working on DoD Department of Defense projects and Navy aircraft. And I also worked at NASA at the Jet Propulsion Lab on future missions around Jupiter. So I like to provide a little bit of information about my journey because maybe it'll inspire yours. Maybe you'll see something that thinks, wow, if she can do it, I can do it. If they can do it, I can do it. So I'm also on a number of boards. You may have the opportunity to be on boards now. You could be on a Girl Scout board or a Boy Scout board or another type of board. And so you might want to think about getting involved in things like that. It's volunteer work, but you learn a lot about governance. You learn a lot about how business and nonprofit and community-based decisions are made. So I'm on a number of boards. I've always been on boards pretty much. Blockchain and Healthcare Today, the Neuroscience Outreach Network, which teaches, believe it or not, neuroscience in Spanish remotely. The IEEE Engineering and Medicine Biology Society, the Ecosystem for Research Networking, Princeton University, Stony Brook University, and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, as well as UC San Diego advisory boards in different areas. And I also work with the National Cancer Institute and computational approaches for cancer. So I'm very involved in the leverage of advanced technologies for good. And that's what a lot of this is about. My background is I'm a Princeton University aerospace mechanical engineer, and then I have executive education certificates at Harvard and Columbia University. And you can learn more about me at fdhint.com/about if you'd like. So I also, when I'm speaking with students and educators and parents and anybody, is to share a little bit of my personal journey. And my key message here is if I can do it, you can do it. So this is me. And this is kind of my journey, a little bit about my background. So actually, my mother died the day I was born and my father left. I never met either of my parents. And so, as I deal with, and I meet different students, I say, so I started as an orphan, and look what we were able to accomplish. So never think, well, you choose how you want to think, but either you can decide you're a victim or you could decide you're going to just go with it, and get over the speed bumps in your life. So my recommendation is keep rolling over the speed bumps till you get over them. You take your past with you. I always say you look over your shoulder and say, yeah, that's there, but you keep going. So this is a little bit about my story. This is my brothers and sister, who are really my uncles and my aunt, because my maternal grandparents legally adopted me when I was an orphan. And so my uncles and aunt became my brothers and my sister. This is my grandmother, who took incredible care of me. I'm very grateful. She was such a blessing in my life. It was her daughter who was my mother. And my family, my kids who are older now, me and Hillary, IBM mentors, some of my mentees. You can see Mariah just graduated from Princeton. I met her when she was matriculating, and we stayed in touch the whole time, and I was at her graduation, and I'm just very proud of her. Some other cool people I've met: Sonia Sotomayor, Supreme Court Justice, and Nobel laureate, Mae Jemison, the first US African-American female astronaut. Being an aerospace engineer and doing design work on the space shuttle, I got to meet the women who were in it. So I designed it, they flew in it. So this is Sally Ride, the first US female astronaut. This is when I met her in college. And I was at a Society of Women Engineers conference. And so this is a little story about it always pays to be nice. So I was walking around campus, I think it was San Francisco State University, and there were these two older women walking, and they looked kind of lost. And I said, can I help you? I wasn't from there, but they looked like they could use help. They said, oh yeah, we're going to watch Sally Ride. I said, oh, I am too, follow me. So they follow me to this, area. We go into this big auditorium, and Sally starts walking toward us. We got there early. And so I'm thinking, oh, she probably has to go to the ladies' room. And she comes up, she goes, hi, Mom. And I was like that was her mother that I helped find her daughter. And so this is the picture her mother took. So I was kind of in shock at the time. And then I introduced Sally to my daughter years later when she was presenting locally. And Bonnie Dunbar, Alan Bean. So I got to meet a number of astronauts. And then this was my mentor when I was at Princeton, and she won the Medal of Technology and Innovation from President Obama. She's passed away since then. And this is her daughter. So this is kind of my journey on one page. I call this my Florence Gump pictures. If you've ever seen the movie Forrest Gump, he has a lot of pictures. He says, I just keep running. So that's a little bit about me. And my key message is, if I can do this, you can do it too. So just go for it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do at the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub. This is one of 4 hubs funded by the National Science Foundation, and you may be working on, research grant funded things right now. Maybe in the future you will. This is open to everybody on the planet. We have a community of over 7,200 individuals. We're about to announce that it's almost 8,000 from around the world. And everything that I'll be talking about today is information that you can gather and take advantage of. We have many programs. We have a National Student Data Corps that provides free open online education in data science. Anybody can use it. We have students in Mali, Ethiopia, Australia, across the US, all sorts of cool places. And we have many other programs here. So you're welcome to go to anybigdatahub.org, learn more about these, become part of the community, sign up for the newsletter, come to our webinars. We love when that happens, and take advantage of some of the cool stuff that we have. So the National Student Data Corps has free open online data science education, including these cool comic books. They're available in various languages. Here you can see English, Spanish, and French. There's Portuguese, and it talks about data science concepts. And we also have data science career panels where we've had about 11 or 12 of them so far. And you can see here, we have a broad range of humans that speak on these panels. We have students that co-moderate them. We have professors. Julia created the comic book series, and others. So it's very inspiring, and you can look to see how people are using data in different industries for good. And then we also have a COVID Information Commons, and this is where you can learn about COVID research. We have over 9,400 awards in there now. And any of these are things I'd be happy to talk about more. And then some of the programs we have for students, we have a COVID Information Commons webinar series. You can hear about COVID-related research funded by the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health. We just announced a KIC, COVID Info Commons Student Paper Challenge you can participate in, a Data Science Student Research Symposium you can participate in and get a cool certificate if you win. We also have learner and educator materials, many videos on data science. We have a chapter system. You can create a data science chapter if you want, NSDC. And we also have a call for manuscripts in blockchain and healthcare today and telehealth and medicine today. So we have many dynamic programs that all of you can take advantage of. So that's a little background about me and kind of why I'm here. I work with a lot of these technologies. So we're going to talk about advanced technologies enabling digital transformation. So many cool opportunities from this. Blockchain is a wonderful opportunity for people and institutions to share data where there's no central authority. There's no one institution or one person that can give you access to other people's data from these other organizations. It's a wonderful resource for that. I have spoken with clinical trials people, healthcare people. I've spoken with national governments about how they would like to create a capability to share data across their agencies because the agencies don't share between each other. It can be parts of an institution, like an academic institution. It's very interesting. So there's some really cool opportunities here, but there's risks because all this stuff is hackable. There's the Internet of Things, all these devices all over the place, which are all hackable. Machine learning, artificial intelligence, big data, which could be big pieces of big data or lots of little data that becomes big data, and all the different forms of reality or alternative realities, augmented reality, virtual reality, extended reality. These are all terms that you may work with or you may hear about. And these are advanced technologies we can use for this really cool digital transformation, taking advantage of all this data that's out there and is growing exponentially every day. So that's a little background about the technologies we're going to discuss. We're going to be focusing a lot on blockchain. So let's think about blockchain. So the beginnings of blockchain actually go back to the 1970s, and you may be aware of that or not. When you talk about artificial intelligence, deep learning, deep QA, these are all terms. They've been around for a while. It's like the Volkswagen Beetle came back. So blockchain technology was described in 1991 by a research scientist, Stuart Haber, who actually was at Columbia. So I reached out to him, but I haven't heard back yet. And Scott Stornetta, and they wanted to introduce a computational practical solution for time-stamping digital documents so that they could be not backdated or tampered. As everything was becoming digital, they were like, we need to have some provenance around this. We need to try to create a management structure. Now, if you look further beyond that, though, and before that, and you do a literature review, you show some interesting publications. This is the one I'm talking about, how to timestamp a digital document. Then you can see Interactive Public Key Crypto System, submitted for publication in 1990. Merkle, you may have heard of Merkle trees, related to big data and blockchain and hashing. And this is one-way hash functions. And this was in 1990. Here in 1988, from Stuart Haber at Columbia, as I mentioned, provably secure multi-party cryptographic computation techniques and applications. So you can see the provenance of why blockchain was created. They really wanted to have a secure multi-party cryptographic computation and sharing mechanism, techniques and applications. And then once again, Merkle, secrecy, authentication, and public key systems in their PhD thesis at Stanford in 1979. So blockchain actually has a rather long history. And if you wanted to, you could read more about this, and it'll give you a feel for why I'm talking so much about cybersecurity and blockchain, because that was one of the original tenets of creating the blockchain type of capability. But then let's talk about Bitcoin. So I remember I went to a meeting at the Council on Foreign Affairs in New York City and met with one of the guys, the American people that was involved from the beginnings of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, you're probably familiar with this October 31st, Halloween 2008 paper released by Satoshi Nakamoto-san, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So this paper introduced the world to Bitcoin as the first scalable peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Hence, we get to crypto. So that was the beginnings of it. And now there's a lot going on. You probably are aware of some of the big hacks, the FTX issue. So there's a lot of risk associated with this. And what I like to focus on is how to keep the people and the humans and the data and the devices secure as everything is more connected and people are trusting these digital technologies. I showed you the picture of me with Sonia Sotomayor. It was at a Princeton University event, my alma mater. And she said, I said, how do you feel about the Internet of Things and all the security and privacy issues? And I told her, I'm working on security. And she said, well, I'm glad you're working on security because I'm working on privacy, because I don't think that our citizens and humans realize the civil rights they're giving up when they engage in these technologies. Very interesting discussion. So if you look, she's actually had some opinions that she's published since then on privacy. Very interesting. But as part of Princeton, I'm very involved there. I'm on some of their advisory boards. They have something called the D Center that was actually funded by some of the alumni some of them are trustees at the university too. And the D Center is the Center for the Decentralization of Power through Blockchain Technologies. So being an engineer and having worked in smart grids and buildings and all these things, when I first heard decentralization of power, I'm thinking the energy grid. No. This is decentralization of political and financial power through blockchain technologies, which is a disintermediation opportunity that actually blockchain presents, right? So the goal with this center is to help develop the technology and its applications and to study its societal and policy impact. You can see some of the folks that are involved in this. We actually have another meeting this Thursday. They had some tickets available for people to participate that weren't from Princeton. The first meeting, this one that I went to in November of 2022, was invitation only to keep it very focused. It's led by Andrea Goldsmith, who's Dean of Engineering at the university, and JP Singh, who's a professor of computer science. And at the first meeting, we had this gentleman, Rostin Benham, who's chair of the U.S. Federal Commodity Futures Trading Commission. And so, of course, FTX came up because the whole thing happened the week before. And he was like, okay, well, I have to hurry because I'm, speaking in front of the, the House or the Senate tomorrow. So there's a lot going on with how do we protect people and help them protect their assets. And then you can see we also had Joe Lubin, who's CEO and founder of Consensus, and a number of other folks. This is one of my classmates, Craig Foreman, and a number of other people in the blockchain world. So there's a lot of discussion going on about what good can be done with it and what are the risks associated with it. And this is actually me right here. So as we were discussing some of the work going on with this, and I look forward to what they're going to do in this space. Now we're here today with the FinTech Center, and my Zoom just updated, so keep your fingers crossed. And what I wanted to do is talk about FinTech and other use cases for distributed ledger and blockchain technologies. So what I'm really interested in is, this is the slide that Sanjay was mentioning we're going to come back to. I'm going to share some thoughts and knowledge I have that was going on in these spaces, but I would love to hear what you all are thinking about this. The good, the bad, and the ugly, as I say, the challenges, the opportunities, the things that or you think are working well. So in FinTech, we know about cryptocurrency. That's a very interesting opportunity and quite a volatile asset. We know that it can be used for supply chain and transport as an example. There was an effort that IBM had going on with Maersk, a number of the large shipping and transportation companies using distributed ledger technology to keep track of all the inventory on the ships. And it was interesting. I was at an event, a Great Lakes Conference event that had Canadians and people from the US side of the Great Lakes, because the Great Lakes kind of span, the border up there. And I was sitting at dinner with these longshoremen who are the guys who are at the dock. And as the ships come in, they look at the inventory. And it was very interesting. They were talking about leveraging blockchain and DLT and having, an iPad or something like that. And they said it's so much better than like the papers flying all over the place, while we're in a blizzard standing out there. I'm like, gosh, this is so cool. It can really infiltrate very practical applications, very interesting. So that's an example of where I've seen it there. With agriculture, some of you may have seen that there are cattle that have, tags, and they actually use a blockchain to sell the cattle and do smart contracts and in a distributed way. Very interesting. So cowboys at the leading edge of technology. In healthcare, I'm on the board for blockchain and healthcare today, which we have a call for manuscripts with. And sometimes when you submit a manuscript or a paper to a journal, there's an article processing charge. They call it an APC. If you become a member of the Hub, which is free, or of the National Student Data Corps, which is free, you just have to kind of get to our website, sign up for the newsletter, become a member. You could actually submit a manuscript regarding the leverage of blockchain or data science in healthcare and in telehealth. And through the end of December of 2023, with the APC, the charge being waived. So you could do that alone. You could do it with students and professors. You can do it with a bunch of students. So if you're interested in that, I'm sure Emily can put the link in the chat, and we'll be able to see that. In public sector and government, I was mentioning that I've consulted with a government entity in another country around the planet that we're friends with. And they were looking at how to provide a private permissioned blockchain, which is really how you keep it secure, between their agencies so that they would better share data. So, I'm sure you've heard some of the situations like with smart cities or smart buildings or smart transportation, where there's somebody who takes care of the roads and then somebody who worries about the pipes breaking under the road, and they go and repave the road and don't know that the pipe broke and now they have to repave it again. And there's keeping track of all this information and finding ways that they can share that to better serve the community and improve efficiencies and reduce costs at the government level, which is very interesting. For the smart grid and energy, we've talked about distributed energy, and you may have a solar panel, or you may have wind turbines, and you may be using energy from the grid, or you may want to give energy back to the grid, and actually using blockchain to keep track of some of that in a community or more broadly. I'm on an advisory board for a project called DER Connect, DER Connect, Distributed Energy and Renewables Connections, at University of California, San Diego, UCSD, and we're talking about leverage of different technologies to enable redistribution of energy. Real estate, one of the first meetings I went to for blockchain in New York City, probably in maybe 2017, maybe. We were talking about real estate and leverage of smart contracts for real estate and keeping track of who actually owns the assets. You've probably seen some horror stories about people who move into abandoned houses, but it was a house that somebody bought a house somewhere else and they just haven't been there for 6 months, and somebody moves into their house. Or I saw another one that there was a woman that was a caregiver for one of the people that owned the house, and she filed some papers that said she now owns it. So is there a way to have a digital technology that keeps track of this stuff so that can't happen and they can't basically hack the paper system? Very interesting opportunities, as well as improving efficiency for real estate transactions and contracts in general. In smart cities, I shared an example of that, but we're also looking at in a very connected and smart city where you have different sensors and different technologies, and you have connected vehicles, and you have kids riding scooters or bikes, and there could be a sensor on their helmet or on their bike, and you could be doing near field communications and realizing that there's a kid coming around the corner and you don't want to hit them. Or it could be that there's tolling that's going on, or some of the other things we talked about. So there's a lot of opportunity for leverage of data and actually having some type of token that you can track where things are going and what's communicating with what. And then within education, there have been applications already with trying to leverage blockchain and distributed ledger technology. It could actually be for certificates or diplomas, very interesting, or for information that's being used in education. So there are all these potential opportunities. And what some people do is talk about how distributed ledger technology or blockchain can enable trusted data sharing and transactions between entities without a central authority. But what I propose is that in this new advanced technology world, I like to say there's a new acronym, ABS, always be suspicious. So make sure that it really can be trusted. And so what should you worry about? You know, it's like if you're traveling to a new country and you're not sure what the laws are or the rules are, like, you know, how can they trust you and how can you trust what's going to happen when you go there? You need to do your homework. And so I suggest that however you're involved in blockchain or DLT, you do your homework. So there are actually trust, identity, privacy protection, security issues with blockchain. There's a high probability of accidental disclosure of confidential data. The shared nature of blockchain can lead to a deliberate hacking into blockchain members' individual storage by a malicious actor facilitated by blockchain access paths. And an interesting example of someone who's very worried about this, a friend of mine, Vint Cerf, who's actually literally one of the fathers of the internet. We were talking about blockchain because I saw him when I had my business card that said blockchain healthcare today. He said, "Oh, Florence, this blockchain thing." And when Vint Cerf says something like that, you could look him up. You're like, oh boy, I better pay attention. So he said, you know, it really worries me that people don't realize that the information they have on the chain or the money they have on it or their data, it can actually be stolen. It could be hacked. Somebody could get into that store, you know, store not being a retail store, but, you know, to the storage of it. And so he famously, I didn't put it in here, but if you look on the internet, I think you can find it. He famously Vint Cerf famously created this little diagram that has like a box that says, do I need a blockchain, with one arrow? And the answer is no. So the way he looks at it is that there are other technologies that you could use to do like a distributed ledger type of thing that could be more secure. And you don't even need to use DLT. There are other ways to get this done. It's very interesting, but what I find very interesting about blockchain is it puts the discussion on the table of, but there's no central authority here. How can we safely share data? How can we agree to share that data? And what value does that bring to the community or to our organization or to the citizens or to the patients or whomever it is? So what I really love about blockchain and DLT is that it puts this sharing on the table. So you can really look at it and say, wow, it would be great if we could do that. So now how could we do it? That's one of my favorite things about it. So going back to what Vince said, there's on-chain versus off-chain. So perpetual blockchain governance debate. What should be on-chain and what should be off-chain? Very famously, one of the professors at Princeton, Ed Felton, who also was an OSTP in the White House for a while, the Office of Science, Technology and Policy, he has a company called Off-Chain. And he's very into thinking what you put on-chain versus off-chain. And off-chain transactions have increased security. It's off the beaten path. It's not right in line of the blockchain. And they also are not bound by the transactional speed limitations that on-chain transactions have. So you may be familiar with some of the speed limitations, and then you need all this processing power, and it creates all this energy use. And, you know, there's a whole discussion around that. But if you have it off-chain and you have your own processing going on, it's not limited by what's going on in the blockchain. So that's another way to look at it. So that's a decision to make. Or if you're not designing the blockchain, just something maybe to know about the blockchain you're involved in. You know, how is it architected? What's on chain? What's off chain? Where's my data? Where's my money? You know, be a little suspicious and make sure you're an educated consumer or an educated user. And private permission blockchains are recommended for critical applications. So I have a friend that I worked with at IBM who's very good. He was in our software group. And he has a healthcare related blockchain technology company. And so we had lunch, you know, where it could be just me and him. And I said, so how do you keep all those blockchains secure? He said, you know, Florence, every blockchain I create for healthcare, I own 51% of the nodes. So he makes sure he maintains control and someone can't use that hack. And so we're going to talk about that. So you want to get smart about these things, I would suggest. And this is a primer, get you started, but I'm sure you could learn a lot more about this. So what are some of the blockchain hack exposures? So the 51% attacks I was just talking about. When someone owns or manages, controls 51% of the nodes, or a group of people that are in cahoots, that own 51% of the nodes, they can create a second version of the blockchain referred to as a fork. They can fork the blockchain where certain transactions are not reflected. And so they create an entirely different set of transactions on the fork and designate it as the true version of the blockchain. Terrible, even though it is fraudulent. So my recommendation is, if you care about what's on your blockchain, is that you make sure that you avoid the 51% hack rule. And when you think about that, and I said, it could be a group of people that own them together. One of the biggest issues that came out in cybersecurity, like 20 years ago, when we were talking, cybersecurity, that's always someone from the outside. Not so fast. Insider threat is huge in cybersecurity. Same thing in blockchain. So you may think you can trust somebody, but they might be a double agent, right? So you really have to think about who you trust. So trust and identity is very important in this space. Privacy of the information, protecting your data, protecting your money, and the safety and security associated with that. Tips, which we're going to talk more about. Also, it could be insufficient security. Cryptocurrency can be stolen if proper measures aren't taken to secure and control the private keys. And favorite targets are exchanges, wallets, and decentralized finance, DeFi, and cross-chain bridge applications. Pardon me, because they're the points where there's a weakness, because there's like an opening almost, there's like a break in the action. And so there are a number of challenges here. If you're designing a blockchain, I suggest you get really smart about this. There are things that you can do, like joining the Hyperledger community, which is free to join. I'm on some of the Hyperledger community calls, and I'm on their listserv, so I can keep an eye on what they're talking about in the Hyperledger fabric and security and all these things. It's very interesting. And these are things that are open that you can take advantage of if you like. So fintech and DeFi hacks, since we're talking about fintech a lot here with this center, you're probably aware, or maybe not, that crypto investors lost nearly $4 billion to hackers in 2022. This is their money, investors, right? And here it was, oh my gosh, I'm going to make so much money, it's going to climb through the roof. And then some of the things fell through the floor. So DeFi protocols accounted for about 82%, or $3.1 billion of all the crypto stolen by hackers in 2022. And oopsie, the majority of the digital funds were stolen from cross-chain bridge applications, like I said, so chains that connect to other chains. So whenever that's introduced, there's another angle of attack into the blockchain, and you really want to think about that. And so the DeFi, or decentralized finance developers, should really learn from and deploy security strategies used by traditional financial institutions to better protect their platforms, including testing protocols with simulated attacks, closely monitoring the blockchain for suspicious activity. Remember I said ABS, always be suspicious, and building processes that will halt transactions if suspicious activity is detected. One of the jobs I had in my many years at IBM is I was VP of Marketing and Strategy for the mainframe, that old thing that was going to be a dinosaur. And it's still used by all the biggest banks and governments because it's the most secure server on the planet. And so there are some, you can't find out everything that some of these technologies use because it's confident. That's why it's still secure, because people don't really know. But there are encryption facilities. There are cool things that are done with chip sparing and varying, different chips or systems offline if you identify an anomaly. So there are some very interesting things that can be done that are well documented that I suggest people learn about and apply. So as I look at all these advanced technologies and think about the risks, what I like to do is think about how we keep the humans alive and how we protect the humans and the things that are important to them, including their finances and their assets. So I work a lot in connected healthcare. And actually next week, I'll be presenting at a conference called HIMSS, HIMSS, the Healthcare Information and Management System Society. And I'm going to be speaking about a standard that I'm working on. I mentioned briefly that I lead a global working group of about 280 people working on clinical Internet of Things, data and device interoperability with TIPS. So TIPS is trust, identity, privacy, protection, safety, and security. So while all these advanced technologies enable connectivity and potentially interoperability, in healthcare, they can enable precision healthcare. They know more about you. They know more about the patient. They know how you react to certain medications so you don't go anaphylactic while you're being taken care of. They know what your family history is by information you give them. They get information from your Fitbit or your Apple Watch or whatever, your connected scale. I think some athletes use that to improve insights and outcomes from a healthcare perspective, but they all add risk. So the Internet of Things, all these devices can be hacked, right? Big data and analytics, could the store be, can be hacked? Can people get to the data? Can they change the data? You may have heard during COVID, UC San Francisco, University of California, San Francisco has a very renowned research group, and they were doing a lot of COVID research, and actually the research system was hacked. So what can happen? They can steal the data, which isn't fair if someone's doing research and someone else uses it or takes credit for it or creates something they get money for. But they could also change the data. That would be terrible. Then people are using information that they think is real, and it could be wrong. And then you can actually have worse health outcomes if you're making decisions based on bad data. There's artificial intelligence. There are different things that could happen with the algorithms. We talked about the protocols that could be hacked. Machine learning, data visualization, quantum tools and techniques, which make it even more interesting, and DLT and blockchain. And so as we look at, healthcare as an example, and we could create pictures like this for other industries, and Sanjay and I have been talking a little bit about applying tips to different areas. So we're going to come back to that. But we look at what are the different inputs? What's the information that comes together? So here we have connected healthcare, clinical IoT devices and data, your Fitbit, your continuous glucose monitor, your insulin pump, all sorts of things, clinical care data that you get the doctor captures or the devices capture and send in, environmental data, including IoT, sensors, if I'm having problems breathing, do I have asthma? Is there pollen? Is there smoke in the air? What's going on? What did I ingest I might be allergic to? The exposomes, they call it, what your body is exposed to. Patient lifestyle data. So how much do I run? How much do I sit? I think I saw somebody that put their Apple Watch or their Fitbit on the dog and then went to the park, and the dog ran around like 5 miles or something. Like, that's terrible. See how people cheat to create bad data? And then research data, whether it's clinical or fundamental research data. And this could be data from all over the planet, because you can have artificial intelligence systems that crawl and find data in multiple languages that, even though a doctor is brilliant, doesn't have the time to read all this stuff and find out what's going on. But these new systems can bring it to you. But can you trust that data? Very interesting question. So you have a compendium of data, and then you get to figure out how to use it to make better choices. So with all this increased connectivity, and I'm talking about healthcare here, but this applies to fintech as we were talking about, we have increased risk and many attack vectors. What could possibly go wrong? This is a friend of mine, Jay Radcliffe. He famously hacked his own insulin pump. It's actually, you can watch it on YouTube if you want. And he's actually a goon at DEF CON, if any of you are cybersecurity people. And a goon is like a king, believe it or not, doesn't sound like it, but for we geeks. And he leads some of the efforts at the cybersecurity conference, DEF CON. And so he hacked his own insulin pump. Insulin pumps could be hacked. Pacemakers can be hacked. The US Food and Drug Administration, FDA, recalled 465,000 pacemakers due to hacking fears. Seriously. They could reprogram the devices. They were exploitable with adjacent access and low skill level. Like if they were within 50 feet of you, think of when you go to the movies, you're in a mall or you're in an airport or in an airplane. How many people are within 50 feet of you? Can you trust all these people? And a low skill level. So there's a lot going on with security and privacy and trust and identity. So we've been enabling an area called TIP. So let me teach you a little bit more about that, because we'd like to talk about it for fintech and other industries. So as you look at all this connectivity, all this access to the devices and data, we must secure the connected devices and data. We want to enable interoperability to leverage that data, the data sharing, as I was talking about with blockchain, like in a government situation, or smart contracts to sell cattle. But we want to protect the devices, the data, and the humans. So my top concerns are connected healthcare devices and data, because if they get hacked, they could rather immediately kill somebody. Connected hospitals, campuses, cities, and vehicles, which you could rather quickly kill somebody. Clinical, scientific, and research device and data integrity. We were talking about the COVID data at UCSF. It could also be any research device and altering the data or stealing the data. And then further, smart cities, fintech, and really any connected solution. So we need to think about protection regarding the devices, the storage of the crypto, the not only where you're storing data and information, but the servers themselves, the connectivity and network connecting all of this, the device where you're getting into it yourself, your cute little phone, and the connection there, or whatever it is you're using. So the device level at the hardware, software, and service level, things you're connected to, software as a service. We need to protect against physical health and safety risk, financial risk and reputational harm, which is the biggest part of fintech, I would say, as well as data theft, data integrity, and loss of privacy, which are also risks in DeFi and fintech. And we need a defense in-depth strategy. If any of you are computer scientists, hardware or software people, we talk about the hardware, firmware, software, and service level. And we need to evolve the policy and the culture. And as you can see, I've been thinking about this for a while. This is a KPMG report from 2015, where I said, they're going to try to hack everything. And I'm most worried about security in healthcare, cars, and moving vehicles, but it really can apply anywhere. And that you really need to design the solutions to be private and secure right from the beginning. And this is where you come in if you're involved in creating any of those. So there are a number of challenges and opportunities for advanced technologies, and standards are being developed to reduce the risk. So I mentioned the TIPS standard I'm working on. It stands for Trust and Identity, Privacy, Protection, Safety, and Security for clinical IoT. There's also data and device validation interoperability. When somebody comes to your front door, someone came in, I don't know, open my front door anymore. I'm like, I don't know my front door, who are you, right? And so when a device is trying to access a device, how does the device know if it can trust the device? You try to get into your applications now, your financial applications, you probably have to use multi-factor authentication. Are you the person I think you are? Do you have access to the software? Do you have a device that I know is your device? And do I know that's actually you? How do you do that with devices? How do the devices know that they can trust each other? How do the devices know that they can trust that human? Is that human the right human to be getting into this? Are they still part of this blockchain? Are they part of this financial institution? How do you check that stuff out? So these are some of the challenges we're talking about. Data and device validation and the interoperability. Integrated systems design, with all this stuff being connected, it's a big system of systems. And then how do you leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning? And then transition to practice of these ideas in real use cases, like FTX or Cattle or whatever it is. Also leverage of new data science tools and techniques, the bias and ethics issues, and leverage of quantum technologies, which is going to make this even more interesting. So TIPS, to culminate all this together, is the new cybersecurity paradigm: trust, identity, privacy, protection, safety, and security. Beyond CIA, which of those of you are cybersecurity people, we talk about the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So this is the new element where you put the humans in the loop. So trust, allowing only designated people and services to have device or data access. Identity, validating the identity of the people, services, and things. Who are you? Prove it to me. How do I know? Who's going to tell me that's really you? Or that device is really that device. Privacy, ensuring device, personal, and sensitive data is kept private. Protection of devices and users from harm. Safety of devices, infrastructure, and people, and maintaining security of the data, devices, people, and resources, like the money and the Bitcoin. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of TIPS. TIPS was initially envisioned in 2016 at the IEEE Trust and Security Workshop for the Internet of Things. We had participants from government, industry, nonprofits, the Internet Society, Department of Energy, National Science Foundation, and we all got together and talked about why we really need this. And you can actually read the report to see what we talked about. And then we started creating a drum beat. For any of you who do marketing, you create a drum beat about, boom, this is what we're talking about. Boom, here's more detail. Boom, let's keep going. And so there are articles that we produced in 2018 on enabling trust and security tips for IoT, all forms of IoT. And then wearables and medical interoperability, the evolving frontier, focusing on the healthcare side, as we discussed. We also created this very detailed, don't be afraid, but we had a bunch of geeks, we got together and said, so if we were going to create this TIPS architectural framework, what are all the pieces we have to worry about? Because we want people to realize there's so much to think about here, and you really have to be careful. So there's the user experience or user interface of these systems, the actual applications, how you integrate them, and these are standards in healthcare. the application programming interfaces and software development kits to create these solutions and share the systems, DLT or distributed ledger technology, connecting, ingesting data and managing it, and all these data sources and targets. And how do we leverage some of the technologies that can help us? Security, encryption, federated identity management, key management, all these different elements. And this is what we take into consideration with TIPS. So as a first step to create a TIPS standard, we created a working group, the Clinical IoT Data and Device Interoperability with TIPS Working Group, with these separate subgroups as we just talked about. We have over 250 working group members now. I think it's around 280. And we have members. And when you think of a blockchain, or you think of a DLT, or you think of a system of systems, you want to encompass all of the players that can make a decision or be part of the solution or be one of the users. So in this working group, we have technologists, device manufacturers like Medtronic or Draeger, the National Institutes of Health, providers known as doctors, payers and owned insurance companies here in the US, patient advocates, regulators, all sorts of people. And we have a number of us that co-lead this together. And as we go through this, we make a list of questions of what questions do we want to answer? And so that might be one thing we can think about if we want to apply TIPS to other use case areas. Think, what are the challenges related to trust, identity, privacy, protection, safety, and security? What questions would we want to answer? So we can come back to this another time when we want to go deeper. So we've also been building TIPS awareness and standards and this drumbeat I was talking about, boom, boom, boom. We've been writing books, which are published by Springer at this point, Women Securing the Future with Tips for IoT and Tips for Connected Healthcare. This is in the Women in Engineering and Science series. One of my girlfriends created that series with Springer. And believe it or not, they're still trying to prove that women can do engineering and science, believe it or not. So we prove it. And in each of these books, I brought 17 women authors along with me so that they can be published as well. Maybe there's a book we can create together, which the HBCU consortium, how cool would that be? Tips in fintech, tips in something else. I'm very flexible. So no promises, but I think there are some cool collaboration opportunities. And we've also written work on tips for smart cities. Actually, this was with Mark Cather, who's the Chief Information Security and Privacy Officer at University of System, Maryland. He was at UMBC when we co-wrote this article together. Then there's a broader world. Smarter cities is going to be an interconnected system of systems. You know, DLT and blockchain can be used there. We can leverage data and devices to make the citizen experience better. Vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure, you know, to the bridges, vehicle to people, all sorts of things going on. Smart grids, smart homes and buildings, and mesh networks connecting them. But remember, all these angles of attack, right? So we need to look at TIP standards, trust, identity, privacy, protection, safety, and security, all these across all these different domains. So one of the ideas that Sanjay and I were batting around, and Ali and a few of us, is, ooh, tips for fintech or tips for some of these other areas. How cool would that be? Let's identify what the challenges and the opportunities are, and then make recommendations. Ensure secure trust and identity solutions for devices, systems, and humans, including blockchains, Bitcoin, on-chain and off-chain. Add security of the communications network infrastructure to strengthen TIPS. I discussed this with NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They're interested in that opportunity. We can teach, expect, and standardize TIPS globally. We can look to constantly reduce the risk to the humans, our assets, our money, our resources, everything, our data, our devices, increasing protection and safety, and make it a given, make it part of what we expect, and bring the humans into the solution so we can do what's right. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. And I hope that was useful. And I think I took around 45 minutes, didn't do too bad. It's a lot of content. I tend to have that issue. I tend to be content rich. So I hope it was useful for people. And I think we can go to Q&A now. Sanjay and Tanisa?
Sure. Thank you very much. We have a few questions out here. Once again, if you have a question, please put your question in Q&A, mention your affiliation. Please also mention your role, whether you're a faculty, student, or you're from the industry. So one question we have from Dr. Shireen Hasavari from Morgan State University, a faculty member. Integrating encryption and security protocols with IoT devices can be difficult with a large fleet of devices. What are the mechanisms available, such as AI, to avoid this limitation and difficulty?
So, you know, regarding difficulty, so I was an aerospace engineer. I designed future missions around Jupiter. Those are difficult too. but difficult, solving cancer, doing heart surgery. There are things that are difficult that are really valuable to do. So while security and encryption can be difficult, it's part of what we're building into the proposed standard for clinical IoT. So we're making recommendations that the device manufacturers and the solution providers should do. I talked to CISA about this. Some of you may be familiar with CISA. They're kind of a cybersecurity overlord for our country. And they said, make sure the SBOM is in there, the software bill of materials. So this stuff is not easy. I agree with you, but it has to be done if you want to be safe. It's like wearing a seatbelt. You don't have to do it. It's a pain in the neck, but it might be able to protect you. So we're in the standard. We're planning to have recommendations of how you can enable this, the encryption and the key management all the way down to the chip level, the subassembly level, and then the device itself and the communication with other devices. So the technologists can do this. They have to bother to do it. To be compliant with the standard is our goal. But we also want this to be approachable. When you create a standard that improves trust, identity, privacy, protection, safety, and security, it can feel like what you're saying, like, oh my gosh, this is so hard to do. So what we're thinking about is after we get the standard announced, God willing, soon, we have the draft available now and we're going through it with some internal folks in the working group, is that we're looking at creating a maturity model. So it's almost like your 5-year-old says, I want to be a doctor. And you don't say, there's no way you can be a doctor. You're 5. You have 12 years of school and then 8 years of medical school. You'll never get there. Or you can say, well, this is how you start. You go to kindergarten. We'll get you in a STEM program. We'll go and talk to a doctor about when they decided to be a doctor. No, you can create a path to get there. So we're thinking about in the maturity model, part of it can be, the first step could be awareness of what the risks are in the system. And then what are some of the things that you can do about it? And then what we can also do is hope that role models come forward to say that, we are TIPS compliant. So where this whole Underwriters Laboratories UL piece of it is, I don't know if any of you think this way, but when I was a little girl, there were little UL tags on electric cords. Any of you old enough to remember that? Anyway, there were these little UL tags. And whenever I used like an electric cord or one of those extension cords, I always looked for it, because I knew it meant that it was safer. And so what we want to do is actually create market awareness and patient awareness about this and user awareness. So as I say, in a few years from now, God willing, it's deployed, the standard, it's built into the devices, and there'll be a little girl at the doctor's office and he'll be saying, I'm going to give you an insulin pump. And I want her to look up to them and say, does it have tips? I want people asking for this. And then we create the demand for it. It may not be easy, but that's why it's important, especially for like new companies creating new devices and they've never done this before. We want them to know you can do this. Here's how you do it. Here are examples of people who've done it, and go on from there. And that's why we create these documents and books, and we'll keep, creating documents through IEEE and other sources and UL, working with ANSI and ISO and IEC and all these other people, if you know all those little acronyms that go with the technical community. So it can be difficult, but it can be done.
Thank you very much. We have 4 other very excellent questions, and we have roughly about 5 minutes with us. So let's try to get these.
Keep my answer short.
So from Kelly Carter, Professor of Finance at Morgan State University. Good question. If I understood correctly, Justice Sotomayor stated that people are unknowingly giving up civil rights when they use these new technologies. What are some civil rights that are being given up?
Well, privacy of your information, people knowing what you're doing in the comfort of your own home. There was, not that I'm condoning it or not, but there was this soccer mom, quote unquote, that lived in a town near me, and they noticed that she was using a lot more energy than the people in her neighborhood. And they went in and found that she was growing weed in her basement. I'm like, are you kidding me? So if she's not dropping the kids off at soccer practice, she had like this farm, and so that's the privacy of your own home. Should they know that? Should they be able to figure that out? Should they be able to get a search warrant to know about that kind of stuff? So that's just one example, but it's the privacy of all your data, right? Should people be able to know that about you? Should they be able to know what health challenges you have or mental health challenges you have? Or, if you use an app online, can people find that? So those are some of the civil rights you have is, the right to privacy. GDPR is a lot about that in the EU. They're really trying to protect their humans and their data. So those are some examples. Does that help?
Thank you very much. It certainly helped me. So the next question is from Dr. Rachel Da Souza from NCANT, Associate Professor. So the question relates to large language models, AI, and have you all examined these LLMs, AI in the TIPS context?
Yeah, what a good question. So now everybody knows what AI is because ChatGPT is out there and everybody can use it. So this is why I talk about ABS, always be suspicious. So I was in a CEO roundtable a couple of weeks ago, and I said, so, why don't you go into ChatGPT and say, tell me about Silicon Valley Bank? It doesn't tell you it imploded because the information it has is limited to before 2021. So then one of the CEOs of a startup in the room said, oh, but GPT-4 is connected to the internet now. I said, did you try it and put in, tell me about Silicon Valley Bank? And he lied. And he said, so then afterward I checked and it still said, Silicon Valley Bank helps, startups and venture capital based. I'm like, oh my gosh. So you don't know the veracity of their data that they're using. You don't know if it's correct or not. If it's open to the internet, they could be picking up anything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? So you have to be careful. And the whole point about AI, I've worked on it for years. I worked on the Watson strategy at IBM before he won Jeopardy. There was deep QA and deep learning and all this stuff. We always meant for there to be a human in the loop. When we're providing knowledge that's valuable for doctors, we're not saying, Watson is a doctor. No. Here's information. The doctor makes the decision. The doctor looks at you and says, I don't know, you look a little jaundiced. Watson can't see that. Maybe they can, but they don't know what to do with it. Or they might not know, what your normal skin color is or whatever it is. So we always meant for there to be a human in the loop. So even when we work with students, I'm at Columbia now, and we work with students all the time. We have thousands of universities we work with, is you have to vet the data and you have to make sure it's your work, that that it's correct. So there's a lot of uncertainty. There's even uncertainty so there's a lot of uncertainty in large language models because you don't know what data they're using, what they didn't bother to use, so they left it out, which is one of the bias and ethics issues in data science. But it's also the algorithms. I work with people like at national labs where they say, once you create the machine learning algorithm, you're done. I'm like, no, that's why they call it machine learning. It should keep learning. But in their environment, they're working with a beamline and like protons and stuff, and that stuff doesn't change, But if you're dealing with social sciences and social media, there's a whole bunch of new information all the time, or even healthcare information. So you have to make sure you're designing a system that's meant to be used to use the data for good. Does that help?
Thank you. The next question is from a student, very likely a student, Austin Horton. What are some things you did in college that prepared you for learning cybersecurity? And what are some of the resources you may have used?
Yeah, so one of the things was the internship I had at Grumman Aerospace Corporation. I was a Grumman scholar. And so I was working on DoD, US Navy aircraft stuff. So cybersecurity, people talk about zero trust. I'm like, cybersecurity was always zero trust. That's the point. You can't trust anybody. That's why you need cybersecurity. And so it was my summer internship. So maybe you can find internships that allow you to do that. In college, I was an aerospace mechanical engineer. I took computer science. And so I learned, the data and compute tools and techniques that I could use to figure stuff out. Since I also designed like a jet trainer, which was for the Navy and the Air Force. And so that's very cybersecurity focused. Anything that's in the defense sector is cybersecurity focused. So if you're involved with defense, there's a lot of cybersecurity there. And now, we actually have work we've done, and Emily, maybe you can put in the chat the Cybersecurity Risk Initiative link. We have another award at the Hub, a cybersecurity risk conference, and we actually funded a sub-award with Rochester Institute of Technology, and they did a summer program for 2 students to work on leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning for cybersecurity analysis. Very interesting. And so you could do AI ML, you could do data science, you could do statistics, Math always helps because math is underneath all this stuff. So those are the different things that I did.
Thank you. If we can go over maybe for about 5 minutes maximum, we have some good questions. There are two questions that are interrelated. One from Kelly Carter at Morgan State, one from Shireen Hasavari, again from Morgan State. And both of them deal with the time it takes to get to market. So Dr. Carter's is developing standards, but to enforce standards was the time that you envision. And the second is from Dr. Hasavari, the time you envision to get, create value and get these use cases in the marketplace, especially those dealing with this convergence aspects.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a couple of answers to this. So when I was at IBM and I was a VP in corporate strategy, I worked on emerging business opportunities. There's a Harvard case study about it if you want to read it. And I created the analytical structure to look at markets that people didn't know because they didn't really exist yet, or they were changing too quickly. And the reticence to go after those markets and how you could create an analytical structure to understand the range of uncertainty and then get into them. So the first thing that has to be done is someone has to decide to go into the market, right? Make that investment. What I found at IBM is if the CEO was behind it, it took 9 months. If he wasn't, it took 18 to 24 months. So it has to do with the leadership if they're willing to take the risk. So you have to be able to identify the risk and the value of doing it, right? Then regarding bringing it to market, it really depends how much resource you have and also your culture. So when I was at NASA and I was working on future missions around Jupiter, I designed sample return missions from the Callisto and Ganymede, the Galilean satellites around Jupiter. And I just turned 20. And I said, wow, when is this going to come to fruition? They said, oh, probably 18 or 20 years. I was like, so their culture is it takes a long time to get this done. You have to get funding and all this stuff. For the TIPS devices we're looking at, we're working on, God willing, getting the standard out this year. We have a standards document now. We're reviewing it. Then it goes to the broader IEEE engineering and medicine biology community, then the broader community, and then blah, 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 and all this stuff. So we're praying that it comes out this year as a standard. Then for it to get to designed into new systems, like all the way down to the IP of the design of a chip, that's going to take a while to get down there and then get into the subassembly and then get into the device and be tested and get out into the market. And maybe there may be some regulators involved at some point or some type of conformity assessment. So as I was mentioning this little girl who might be getting an insulin pump, I'm thinking that like, in 3 years, I'm hoping that the patients know about it. It's deployed in the technology. We have a number of players in the market that are in this with us. So Medtronic, one of the senior technical fellows is my co-vice chair. Indiana University Health, the chief information security officer who deploys these technologies. Draeger Medical Systems, that got one of the treasurer of our working group. So they are learning right from the beginning. And so they could more quickly deploy this, we hope, because this can save lives. So we're trying to grease the skids, so to speak, by inviting these people in right from the beginning. And like when I present next week at HIMSS, I'm going to invite everybody to get involved, become part of the solution. Tell us how to make it better. What could it be in the future? So it could be, maybe it could be a year and a half on the quick side. It could be a brand new company that's designing their own stuff and they don't have to wait. They're just creating what they call a greenfield. That could be faster. But for it to really get into the networks and the payers and providers and insurance companies and everybody, it's probably going to take, 2 or 3 years, I would say, that people actually know enough about it. We also plan on, as I said, educating patients and consumers as well.
Thank you very much. This was very useful to have some sense of the timeline also.
Sure, I'm happy to. And I'd like to say anybody in here that wants to be our friend and talk about, I see Andrea at Howard University. I'd love to talk about tips and what y'all are doing. I saw, Rochelle, if you want to look at tips and LLMs and all sorts of interesting stuff, we'd be happy to collaborate on this stuff. We create working groups around interesting areas. We have a COVID InfoCommons student working group right now on some, the mental health results of, what happened with COVID. We're working with another public policy group or public organization in California on the impact in education. So we are very open to creating, working groups to create collaborations with students and professors and professionals in any of these spaces. That's who we are as the Big Data Hub. We're a collaboration hub and a catalyst for innovation. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, email me. You can find us. We're very findable.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hudson. So very briefly, the reason for this particular webinar was that we normally associate blockchain with the permissionless blockchains such as Bitcoin. To get the other use cases of blockchain, they need to be connected. Data needs to come in from perhaps Internet of Things devices, AI. So the connections are necessary, the technologies will converge for blockchain to become of utility. And it was the TIPS framework is such a great framework for us to get a handle on all the issues that we may have in this convergence aspect. So thank you very much. I'm sure all the attendees enjoyed and learned a lot from this particular talk. Thanks to the Morgan State team also, Dr. Emdad, the director, and Ms. Tanisha, the communications coordinator. Once again, please be on the lookout for other announcements regarding our other events from the National FinTech Center. Thank you all very much.
And thank you for having me. It was really an honor. And good luck, everybody.
Thank you.